I'm going to get started with the meeting. Thank you for coming. It's nice to have everybody here with us tonight.
Got the civil defense. Yeah.
And mute yourselves if you can. Tonight we have with us Colonel Jim Smith. And Colonel Jim is a registered paramedic and has been involved in law enforcement and public safety for more than 45 years. He is a co-author of several textbooks, including Tactical Medicine Essentials, Downed Operator Course, and Rescue Task Force programs based on the textbook. He has a master's degree from USC and teaches criminal justice courses for the University of Phoenix and Troy University. He is a certified police chief and a certified law enforcement executive. He is a former police SWAT member and is a TACDA Board Advisor. And he's also a frequent contributor to the Journal of Civil Defense, which we appreciate so much. Before we get into our meeting, I need to mention a disclaimer, and nothing in this presentation should be considered legal, medical, or financial advice. The opinions of the viewers can differ considerably and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of TACDA. You should always do your own research and consult with professionals. The format tonight is informal. We like to allow questions on the fly so that your answers can be in context. So feel free to use the chat feature or raise your hand or simply just tell us you have a question. We'll do our best to get your questions answered. So with that, I will turn the time over to Jim.
Hey, thank you very much for the introduction. The Tactical Medicine Essentials textbook, give you a little background where it came from. We spent about 7 years developing it, and I say we, there's several other people besides me involved in this. This is the only textbook that's approved for use by the only approved tactical medicine academy in the U.S., approved by Homeland Security. And the American College of Emergency Physicians recognizes the textbook and recommends it also. So without further ado, let's get through this. And like you said, the disclaimer, this is just an overview. I don't expect you to be able to go out and practice medicine, but I do expect you to come away with some knowledge of what you can and should do should you have some uncontrolled bleeding. And I think we've talked about that pretty well. Anyway, follow the standards of your area. Most areas still do Good Samaritan, and you can render aid without fear of legal liability. We suggest that you carry what we call level 1 gear. This is, you carry anybody that's exposed to gunfire, and obviously this is police-based. Although we do teach it at some of the medical facilities, surprisingly enough, tourniquets still have a very valid use, even in the emergency department setting in a hospital. So this is something you have to have with you. It's like insurance, like a fire extinguisher. When you need it, and nothing else will do. A tourniquet and preferably what we call an OLAS or an Israeli dressing are critical items. And you say, hey, I don't want to spend all this kind of money. The tourniquets are a one-time purchase, and obviously they can be, we reuse them for training. I don't recommend them be reused after they've been exposed to bloodborne pathogens. And the obviously the dressings are a one-time use thing, but they're very inexpensive. There's a pile of people out there making them, all sorts of different tourniquets available. We use those by TACMed Solutions simply because the company's run by a bunch of veterans that were in the sandbox and have personally developed a lot of, and patented a lot of the equipment here that you may see. Where can you carry this stuff? A lot of our farmers carry this type of material with them simply because they're in a rural area and they may be 20, 35 minutes from help. And if they get entangled in machinery and need to control bleeding, they can do it with a tourniquet or with the battle dressing. So as you can see from the law enforcement side, we carry them everywhere. I typically carry 2 in addition to a full bag since I'm paramedic. But like I say, that's one of the birthday, Christmas present type gift that I give to a lot of my friends is I'll give them a tourniquet and a battle dressing. Seems kind of odd, but if you're in a situation where you've got potentially exposed and need to do bleeding control, this literally can be life-saving. Those 2 items, the battle dressing and the tourniquet, is what we call an individual first aid kit, an IFAC. and we carry them with, even off duty, I carry these things with me because you never know when something's going to happen. Once again, you can and will control bleeding from an extremity. You can use the bandage if you've got people with you. If you're by yourself, obviously a tourniquet is one of the first things you'll want to try. The largest preventable death that we see today in gun battles and in combat for that matter is extremity hemorrhage. And it's simply controllable. Even now, beyond what you're seeing here, there are devices that we can control bleeding, internal bleeding in the abdomen, bleeding in junctional arteries, and other devices that are coming on the market that are just incredible. Something that would have happened 5 years ago, a person would have bled to death, even with what we're seeing here. But now we can compress the abdominal aorta and other things. Medical personnel can do this anyway, but it's amazing what's coming out. Another thing is, if you are engaged in protecting your home, you're engaged in law enforcement duties or other duties where you're having to defend someone, it allows you to stay in the fight. One of the things we teach everyone is, if you're shot, if you can, finish the gun battle, then put the tourniquet on. 30 seconds, a minute's not going to matter. But if not, stop, put it on, and continue the mission. Your own personal safety and medical care is critical. And if you have teammates or family members, and then of course care of other folks, hostages, bystanders, suspects. And I cannot emphasize to you enough, I've seen several shootings where citizens have intervened and stopped mass shootings, but I've also seen several of them get killed. If you're treating someone and there's been gunfire, stay situationally aware. The one that I remember are the two folks in Las Vegas that assassinated the two police officers, then went into a Walmart. A citizen started to shoot one of the mass shooters and was gunned down by the mass shooter's partner. That's very unusual. Less than 2% of the mass shootings have more than one person involved. But this simply stay aware of your surroundings. There may be other bad guys around. And once again, make certain your six or your rear is covered. Critically important. Okay, and we always talk about call a cab and go hot, and that sounds kind of goofy, but the thing that we want you to think about in these situations, because gunfire has started, who knows how long it's going to last, where it's coming from, and whether or not you are a target. So we've got the acronym. What does it mean? Call out for help and communicate with the people around you. Abolish any threats. Hopefully you're doing this while you're calling out. Circulation, we want to stop bleeding, because that's our first number one thing. People are going to bleed to death. They can tolerate no airway for a little while, then check an airway, and then breathing. Then if we decide the person is okay enough for us to try to move them, quick neurological status check, then we go rapidly to the best medical facility, hot. And I know several of you are well dressed there. I'm sitting here looking at our temperatures, see 55, which is not bad. Normally we're running about 70 in the daytime here, but it's cooling off with the heavy rain that's going to get in West Virginia and all your snow that's going to have. We're getting it right now. But prevent hypothermia, keep them warm. And it's an easy to remember mnemonic. Communicate, get some help, let everyone know what's going on. If you're going to move and you got people around you that are armed, then you need to let them know so they won't inadvertently shoot you. That's one of the things that we deal with, because typically we're dealing in a law enforcement environment where there'll be multiple people with firearms. Abolish a threat. You've got to do that. Typically, if we have gunshots and somebody goes down, we wait a full 30 seconds before we do anything. Why do we wait? One, we're looking to see where the threat came from. We're trying to determine if we can negate that threat, get rid of the threat. And, hey, if the person is dead, we're trying to make a determination they're dead. If they're dead, they're going to stay there. We let the dead stay in place. And you can do that pretty quickly. If we can grab them and pull them to cover, then we'll do that. Now, what's cover? Hard cover is going to be a masonry wall, something that will stop bullets. Cars don't work well, and it's too easy for bullets to ricochet, bounce, or skid under vehicles. or you bring hard cover to the casualty, an armored vehicle. You know, I've all seen the Bearcats and armored cars that we used in the shootout in LA. So you can improvise if you have to, but the thing is, don't expose yourself unless you know the person is alive and salvageable. Watchwords, stay in the fight. We've talked about that. Have a combat mindset, regardless of whether you're actively involved with law enforcement, the military. You've got to have that mindset that I will survive, I will make it, I will stop this threat, because it may be a shooting in your home where an armed burglar has entered, and everyone thinks, well, that can't ever happen to me. Well, it will, and it can. We had several years ago in my area, 10 people shot and killed in different locations from an individual that had a mental health issue. And then we had 2 criminals that killed 6 in one family many years ago. So yes, it can happen in a rural area, it can happen in an urban area. All right, if they're dead, you know they're dead, don't worry about them. Always think about bloodborne pathogens, confused people staggering around. If they've been shot, they may be confused. And the thing that I always worry about, and something you need to think about, if you're not easily identified as a good guy and you pull out a firearm on a scene with shooting, we'll have fratricide. We even have that with law enforcement with officers in uniform. So that's one of the blue on blue incidents, fratricide, we worry about. Also, the people that are down that you may be rescuing, how do you know they're not a bad guy? That's one of the things we always worry about is, are we rescuing someone that's actually a shooter? So that's one of the other things. You produce a firearm at a shooting, the first thing that's going to be in everyone else's mind is you are the shooter. So think about that. What else is out there? Threats of seemingly innocent people. If law enforcement is involved, all sorts of firearms, distraction devices, all sorts of things that if you have to deal with a down police officer, which thank goodness a lot of civilians do rescue officers that are down, things that you need to worry about there. And those can be a problem. Abolish threats, remove and secure any weapons from critically injured person with a decreased level of consciousness if they're out of the fight. That's one of the things. If the person's alert, don't take their gun away from them if they're a good guy. They can still fight even though they're down. CAB, circulation, airway, and breathing. In the tactical environment, what's going to kill somebody? And that's bleeding to death. They can tolerate not having an airway for a minute or two until we can get the bleeding controlled and get that airway back open. Breathing is second choice. So what we'll need to do is get that bleeding stopped if it's from the extremity, then get that airway open, get them breathing, and maintain that airway. And how can we do that? And we'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, stopping significant extremity bleeding. Compression dressing or tourniquet. If you're by yourself, put your tourniquet on yourself, even if it doesn't look like it's a substantial bleed. Now, here's the key. Is putting a tourniquet on it going to cause damage? Possibly. However, knowing that you may not have help for 20, 30 minutes and you could bleed to death, you've got to balance that risk in putting that tourniquet on. Chances are you're not going to cause any permanent damage. No, obviously, no one can guarantee that, but they're tolerated quite well. And I will tell you this, if you've ever been shot and then had a tourniquet applied, you will forget the gunshot wound. The tourniquet hurts far, far more than the gunshot wound does. All right, obviously, if the person is where you can support them, then you can do CPR. If you have an AED present, you can use that. In multiple casualty incidents, you have to follow your local protocol. Typically, if we've got people down in cardiac arrest at a multiple casualty incident, we're not going to stop for those that are down. We're going to try to extricate those that are salvageable. It sounds sad, but that's unfortunately the thing. Airway, how can we do that? Obviously, if you know how to do CPR, that's very simple to do. Recovery position is probably the best way. This way, if the person vomits, more than likely, they're going to clear that airway and remain okay. Also, if they happen to have a torso injury, they're shot in the chest, you can roll them on the side that has the bullet wound and make sure it's down. Bullets always go down. That's one of the things that we want to do. That'll pool the blood in the lung and not interfere with bleeding. That's one of our authors right there, Dr. John Whipler, one of the guys that helped put this thing together. Watch patient's chest rise and fall, feel for air through the mouth and nose, make sure they're breathing. see how much effort they're taking. People with breathing problems need to go to the hospital right now. Obviously, we'll try to intubate them and do other things. If we're going to move them, we'll do it very quickly to make sure they don't have any neurological problems. We'll see if they're alert. Do they respond to us when we talk to them? Are they responsive to pain? Are they unresponsive? If their pupils are unequal, then that's an indication that we're dealing with a significant head injury. And once again, these people need to go to the hospital very quickly. You want to see, can you wiggle your fingers? Can you wiggle your toes? Can you feel me touch your fingers? Can you feel me touching your feet or your boot through your boot? If they do, then hey, they've got intact nerves and you can go ahead and move them. And that's when I squeeze my hands, wiggle your toes, that sort of thing, go through and check that out. And what we're looking for there is to make sure that any spinal injuries. In a situation where people are shooting at us, we may not be able to do this. We have to get the patient to a safe place before we can really do that. And once again, you have to balance. Does extrication need to come first, or do I need to start my medical intervention? If you're in a place where bullets can strike you, then obviously you're going to need to get into heart cover first. Go. Take the patient to the hospital. If you've got to wait 20 minutes for an ambulance and you can meet the ambulance along the way, it makes sense to load the person in the back of a patrol car or other vehicle and meet the ambulance somewhere. If you can get a helicopter, then that's great. Right now, the way some of the weather sounds, you wouldn't be able to fly. I know in our area, certainly helicopters are down because of all the thunderstorms. But once again, go to a hospital, and you need to know what hospitals are available in your area, which ones are trauma centers, which ones are stroke centers, which ones have the ability to do cardiac intervention if you should have other medical problems. Most states have an emergency medical services system that categorizes hospitals, and you can check with your local EMS folks and find out which one you need to go to for what problem. Many areas have a system where if there is an injury, the Trauma Communications Center is what it's called in our area, tells the ambulance which hospital to go to, which one has the appropriate staff, which one has the appropriate equipment. Can they treat a stroke? Can they treat a gunshot wound? Can they treat a head injury? And they will route them to the correct hospital. In doing so, in this state, we've reduced traffic crash mortality by 25% and the mortality from strokes by about 14%. So it's amazing, just go in the right place a lot of times may mean the difference literally between life and death. And like I say, if you can get a helicopter, that's even better. You'll definitely get in a lot quicker that way. Hot, hypothermia, you think that, well, it's not really going to be a problem. But remember, the moment a person starts losing blood, they're losing temperature. Blood's warm, it's flowing out. The person may be wet. You want to reduce heat loss. You want to dry the patient, warm the patient. Sometimes we give warmed IV fluids if we have to, but keep them warm. We found out that temperatures, when they drop, you get hypothermic below 95 Fahrenheit in trauma, that our mortality rate jumps up a tremendous amount. So keeping a person warm once you start good treatment, then that's very important. It may not be possible in a field setting, particularly if they're wet. We're always astounded at the number of people that we have injured fishing and they fall in the water and they get hypothermic very quickly. Hypothermia will kill you. Something to remember to keep your casualties warm. Low threat warm zone, get somewhere where you can actually do patient care. Hit by gunfire, we extract them either yourself or you dragged out by your partner or somebody else to a nearby masonry wall, hard cover, get a tourniquet on and evacuate. A drag stretcher, and it can be anything. Grabbing their clothing to get them out, but get them out of that area quickly. Once again, the call a cab and go hot. Traumatic patient assessment. Is the patient down from a trauma situation or a medical collapse? And typically what we're going to be seeing is pretty much medical. If it's trauma, then we're looking at compressing killer bleeds, airway breathing, and it works on both ways. If you've got an AED, most states will, once again, if you have an AED available, use Good Samaritan and allow you to use that if you've had some training. It's not hard to use. In fact, we took a group of children that were between 6 and 7 years old and tried to see if they could learn enough about CPR and how to use an AED. And we were really surprised that they absorbed the material quite well. And I know that 10 and 12-year-olds, because we teach them routinely CPR and how to use an AED. So I know if 6 or 7-year-olds can figure it out, surely an adult can. Then again, I don't know about some of the medicine bottles. You have to get a child to get into them. Once again, what we're interested in is external bleeding, is controlling that. That is the key. Internal bleeding, not much we can do with that. That's going to take a surgeon in the OR. And yes, those are actual intestines, an ulcer down. We cover those up and we go ahead and go very quickly to the operating room. Once again, you can use the battle dressing. You can control extremity bleeding by compression or a tourniquet. And once again, if you're by yourself, you probably don't need to look at the wound in the gun battle. As soon as you can, cut the clothing away. And if you're by yourself, put a tourniquet on. Okay, geriatric patient, I hate that because I fit that category. Anybody with continued bleeding that the battle dressing doesn't stop, then you go ahead and put a compression dressing followed by a tourniquet, and the tourniquet's going to have to need to go up there. Hang on just a second. We've just had something happen and I've got to respond to a call. Hold on. Hey. Hey, can you go that way? I'll back you up in just a little bit. All right, call me when you get there and I'll be in right shortly. Okay, speaking of that, we just had a shooting. So anyway, heck of a note in the middle of a presentation on this.
Are you going to need to, do you need to leave?
Yeah, I am in just a minute. Finish and win the gunfight. You can leave a tourniquet on for 2 or 3 hours. Slide a wrap it around a couple inches above the wound, get it in place, and then snug it down. It's got a windlass and a strap. Keep up how long you've had it applied. Know that when it's going to go, it's going to hurt. Incidentally, they make, and I carry these for my canine.
How long can you keep that tourniquet on?
2 or 3 hours without any problem. Hey, listen, when they do knee replacements, they have a tourniquet on your leg for sometimes up to 6 hours. So I wouldn't be terribly concerned about that. Improvised stuff, let's go to that real quickly. That's what you're going to need. There is basically a triangular dressing. Y'all remember the cravats? Maybe some of you old enough to remember those from school. And a stick, and it can be a dowel of any sort. And you put that on, tie the square knot, loop it around, then tie it down. Works great. Good improvised. Worst case scenario, blood pressure cuff will work. Just keep somebody standing there with it to keep an eye on it. And let's see, there's the battle dressings. That's a Disraeli dressing. This is the OLAS dressing. OLAS is pronounced here, and I never can pronounce it correctly. Invented by a medic in the sandbox during the second Iraqi conflict. And they all work well. And we were about finished anyway. So I'm going to, unfortunately, this of all times, have something happen. I'm gonna need to go.
I know, we hate to see you leave, but we certainly want you to get to your emergency.
Yeah. Anyway, you've got, if anybody wants that presentation, they can either email me. I think you've got my email address, or you can share it with them.
Yes,
and with that, I have to go. I'm sorry.
We'll let you go, Jim. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, well, I think there's a lot of, there could be some medically trained people here. If anybody wants to expand on what Jim was talking about with the battle dressing in particular, I think he rushed through that. Does anybody know anything about the battle dressing? Yes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm ex-law enforcement, and I haven't been in any shootouts, thank God, but Yeah, he's right. You've got to make sure you assess the area before you go out there. 30 seconds to a minute. Make sure it's clear, because if you go out to help somebody else, you may wind up getting shot yourself, and somebody's going to have to come and try to help you too. So it's really important that you pay attention to your surroundings, and everything that he's had on there. I mean, I've been through training. Very well done. I'd like to get a copy of that, because I will share that with people around here.
Yeah, I do have a copy, and I will post that on the website. If you go to the resources on the navigation bar, on the very bottom, it will show TACDA monthly meetings, and I will post that attachment with this, the recording of this meeting.
Okay.
For
Thank you.
January 15th. I think Buck had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, regarding the battle dressings,
Uh-huh.
I always keep at least 2 in my truck, 1 in a glove box, because they're extremely handy to use in situations where you're out hunting or fishing or something. Always put one right in your pocket, because you never know when you're going to need one.
Yeah.
Roseanne?
Bill,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
think Bill had a hand raised. Is that right? No? Okay.
I was just going to, you hear me, Roseanne?
Uh-huh.
I was just going to say that we went through that a little quickly too, but make sure that when you're putting a tourniquet on, that it's between the heart and the injury. Sometimes we'll see people putting the tourniquet below the injury and the heart is above the injury, and then we don't do the good that we need to do.
So if the bleeding is above the knee, you put the tourniquet just
Below the
above it.
groin, below the, above the injury and between
Above
the
the
injury.
injury. Okay,
So the heart has to be above the tourniquet.
okay. And about that battle dressing, is that just what is that? It looks like a big, thick absorption piece of material, but go ahead.
It's a square bandage that's absorbent. It's attached to a piece of fabric, usually either in strap or triangular shape, to be able to put the bandaged part on the wound and then secure it in place with the straps.
Okay, so it goes on tight
Yes,
and stops the bleeding with that
Yes.
absorbent material and with the bandage wrapped around it tightly.
and you can get them that are pre-treated with a clotting factor in them.
Oh,
But maybe we ought to carry those on our website, that would, on our,
battle
on our
dressing and tourniquets. Yeah, Bruce has mentioned that before. I've had a hard time getting them, but I'll look into that again, see if we can get some tourniquets and battle dressing. Go ahead,
and when,
Mike.
Yeah, also, if you don't have the tourniquets around, you can use anything, diapers or feminine napkins, anything that's absorbing, anything clean. You know, if I was at an accident scene one time and I was on my way to work, I had a clean shirt on. I only had it on like 10, 15 minutes, and I used that to help stop bleeding. So anything that's clean, because you want to try to keep infection away as much as possible, protect yourself as well. But if you don't have the tourniquets, anything like feminine napkins or diapers are really great to have, and most people have them around.
Mhm.
and of course, that's a dressing, and the tourniquet would have to, you can put the tourniquet over the dressing if it's, you know, if it just needs to have pressure, because we need the
Right.
dressing and pressure. But if you need a tourniquet and the dressing, and it doesn't stop, then you need to have that tourniquet between the heart and the injury. But
Right, and-
you're right, I always carry items like that for injuries. I've stopped at car accidents all over the world and have used feminine napkins to stop bleeding. In Peru, came across a real bad accident and had to use feminine napkins to stop the bleeding and help people. But basic first aid is so important, and the ABCs, the airway and the breathing and the circulation. I thought it was interesting that he felt like the bleeding was more important than the circulation, and I had always been taught differently, but I can see that it's absolutely true. If you're bleeding and going to bleed out, then you can wait a short period while you're
1 or 2 minutes.
bleeding before you stop that.
Plus you can't do CPR if they're bleeding because they're going to bleed the blood out as you're
Right.
compressing the heart.
But how simple it is to be able to learn how to open that airway, you know, if someone, they can just close their airway just by having their head leaning forward, and you need to know that you carefully open that airway. So a good first aid class is so important, and CPR is easy. And I've had to do CPR 4 times. I ran on the ambulance a little while and did it on the ambulance, but off of the ambulance, I've come across 4 accidents where I've had to do CPR, and I've been so grateful for that ability to do it. Even though I'm not very big, you can do CPR, even a child can. So it's something that we ought to all learn. And most of those of us here do already know it.
Buck, did you have something else you want to share?
Yeah, one little bit of emergency gear. If you don't have access to the compression bandages, a simple 100% cotton washcloth in a Ziploc bag and a roll of duct tape will take care of the problem.
That tape is amazing. That's a really good idea. And we did in our neighborhood, we asked everyone to take their old sheets and make triangular bandages and serge the edges. And then we washed them good in Clorox, and then we baked them a little bit in a low oven to really sterilize them, and kept them in plastic bags. And then we always kept several of those. I mean, triangular bandages, you can do anything from dressings to splinting breaks and any number of things, but everything, there's so many things, a man's belt, so many other things can make a tourniquet. So we need to just kind of think through the scenarios, but if we haven't thought about it, then we won't do it. But it's nice to refresh those first aid classes.
For sure.
This is Max. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I just finished my 4th EMT class.
Wonderful.
I went to the 4th one because it had been 18 years since the 3rd one, and I stopped at an accident, and I was so out of practice. It's one of those things that if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I thought I better brush up on these skills, and it was a great experience. In fact, I found a free course, and you actually might be able to find some in your area. A lot of states or the national government sometimes offers grants to cover some of these classes. And I was able to get myself and 2 sons, a sister, some neighbors, brother-in-law. We had like 11 people that were able to take this class together.
Wow.
But an interesting thing, when we were talking about tourniquets, one of the instructors mentioned a little factoid that he had found out about the Boston Marathon bombing. He said that 100% of the makeshift tourniquets failed. That doesn't mean they didn't help some, but 100% of them did not completely do the job that a tourniquet should do. So it's important to actually, like Sharon and others have been saying, to actually have the tourniquets with you on your person. There are some ankle holsters that actually carry some tourniquets and other gear on your ankle. And it's under your pants. You don't have to have a lot of bulky stuff on your belt and things like that. So you could always have one available. There are clips or holders that you can have them on your visors or on the headrest of your car, so they're easily accessible. And there are a number of different makes of the tourniquets. The CAT tourniquet is the one that the military uses the most. It's Combat Application Tourniquet, I believe, is what the CAT stands for. There are some that are all rubber. That's a SWAT T, and it's just like a very, very long rubber band that has a diamond shape on it. And when you stretch it out, that diamond turns into a square, and that way you know you've tensioned it properly, and you could wrap that around, and they're easy to get through TSA. Nobody ever stops you if you have something in your pocket that's all rubber, and it's not an issue. But you can also, like you said, you can use the triangular bandage folded into a cravat, and you can use that very effectively. So like Sharon says, get all those extra sheets and have them available. There is The Curlix is a very commonly used thing in the ambulances or in EMTs. It's just a rolled gauze. You can roll that around in a certain way, and then you can apply that that windlass, that stick, to twist it around, and that can also work very well. So there's just a couple of points there that you would want to have available to you.
Well, and
Can
it's
you,
easier for a. Go ahead, Roseanne.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, can you actually stop bleeding okay just by applying pressure?
Sometimes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
But it's kind of like a faucet. If it doesn't stop it, then you know you have to go to the next step. And if you
okay,
have a
so first you
tourniquet,
just put your weight on it and apply pressure on it, and then if that doesn't work, then you look for something if you don't have a tourniquet.
Sometimes if the
Right,
person's, sometimes if the person is awake and aware, they can apply their own pressure too while you're trying to get something together.
Mhm.
but if it's pulsing, if there's if blood is actually spurting, you know that you have an artery, you
Artery,
know
yeah.
you have to get into a tourniquet. That pressure just isn't going to work.
Uh-huh.
But if you are going to put on a tourniquet, make sure that you turn it just like a faucet until that bleeding stops. And
Okay.
and it is uncomfortable for them, but you have to stop that bleeding. And the men, I was just going to say, you know, it's easier for men to hide things on their body. They have bigger, bulkier clothes, but women, I like to carry a larger purse, and I always carry a tourniquet in it and a knife, pepper spray, a little something that I can use for a dressing. And it's easy for a woman to carry in a purse. No one really knows it, and it doesn't bother the
Mhm.
bulky clothing issue.
Yeah. But we have it easy. The men will
Yeah.
have to get a man purse.
Oh,
There are lots of pockets, but they don't
Yeah.
seem to care about bulky places. We kind of care.
Yeah,
We
true.
want to be bulky.
That's why they made backpacks.
True.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Such great thoughts. Thanks, everyone. Does anyone have anything else to share? Any other comments or questions?
oh, I got some.
Rescue has a wonderful
Oh,
tourniquet. It's only $30. And they've had a number of 10-year-olds do it. It takes them 12 seconds. And it stops major artery bleeding, which is usually the way people die. So I'd love to have that on the survival store.
did you, we didn't hear the first thing you said. You cut out in the beginning. What was the name of the tourniquet?
North American Rescue. If you go to North American Rescue, it's a bunch of special forces guys that
Okay.
got tired of the cheap stuff they had in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they formed a company called North American Rescue in Carolina. And they have a number of medical kits, which are just terrific. But they also have a cat, and their cat is, the winglass is very simple, very easy to use. Most children can master it, which is why I like it. And whoever said you should always have it on your visor is correct, because if you flip the truck and nobody's around, you want to be able to have it within reach so that you can stop your own bleeding.
Mhm.
Wow, what a good idea.
Yeah.
I got something for you.
Yeah.
Check with your local American Legion post, disaster preparedness. They are in charge of training for like first aid and that sort of thing.
So any of the American Legions, we can call on them to help train us. Great.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, one other thought is as far as training goes, if you check with your local sheriff's department or
Yeah.
local PD, they may have a training session for reserve officers, and they may be able to let you get in on the medical part of it to get your certificate. And not that you need a certificate, but it's kind of nice to have. And you can learn everything that you need to learn for the Red Cross, but it costs money for the Red Cross.
Okay. Good to know. All right.
Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
Yeah, same
Of
here.
course.
Nice meeting
Bill,
everybody.
I can see you speaking, but we can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I said that if you check with your local officials, in the county or the city or whatever, they're usually glad to have, if you'll get a small group together, they're glad to have a paramedic come and give you a class. We did that for a group of my friends, and the guy that came was a RN/paramedic. Did a beautiful job.
Oh, great. All right, good to know. Okay. All right, so it looks like no more questions. I just wanted to mention, I should have mentioned this in the beginning before some of the people left. If you want to share this, the link to the Zoom meetings, please do share it with your friends. The only reason we don't invite more people is just because we like to know who is, who's with us. Because we have thousands of TACDA members, but we don't know all of them, and we want to make sure that we, we just stay secure with our computer systems and such. So
We're just inviting those that have actually paid for a hardcover journal and have paid for the membership. We're not inviting the free memberships. Is that what you're saying?
that's what I'm saying is that, yeah, I mean, there are thousands of TACDA members that we could invite, but we're not ready to do that at this point just because of security issues on the cybersecurity issues. So we feel like we know you, you know us, and we're just going to go from here. But we trust that you also have good people that you might want to join. So please go ahead and share the links if you want to. We'd love to have more people learning with us.
I'll send you some information on myself. I'll send you a bio, and so you know who I am for sure. And I'll pass on anything that we're doing down here before we actually start it.
We'd
Oh,
love
yeah.
to have bios from all of you. It'd be so fun to get to know you better.
Well, yeah, it's fun too to
Don't
see
need
if,
it. It's just if you want to share it, we would love to have
Yep,
that
absolutely.
information to get to know
yeah, and
you.
if you have an expertise that you'd like to share in one of our meetings, if you'd like to present, a meeting, or if you'd like to submit something for the Journal of Civil Defense, we certainly would appreciate those too.
No, I appreciate it. I've got a law enforcement background and security. That's what I just retired from, was security. I was head of security for Siemens Wind Energy up in Iowa. And I retired a little bit early and kind of enjoying life now and building our homestead. So I've got a little bit of time I can take to put into this.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I'm going to go. Having a good night. Nice meeting you all.
Yep. Nice to meet you.
Good night.
We'll call it a night. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have
Thanks
a
for
great
coming.
weekend. We hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Right.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.